I wasn't looking for a pattern when I started mapping Etruscan city-states. I was simply trying to understand their territorial expansion, marking settlements on a map, checking archaeological sites, cross-referencing ancient sources, standard historical research, nothing unusual. But then I noticed something that made me stop. 12 cities. Always 12. Not 10, not 15. Exactly 12 major centers forming what ancient sources called the Etruscan League. And here's what disturbed me. When I dug deeper into why it was precisely 12, I found something Rome tried very hard to obscure. A religious significance so profound that Rome copied the entire system, the exact number, the political structure, the sacred meetings, but systematically erased who invented it. Let me show you what they didn't want remembered. The 12 cities of the Etruscan League weren't randomly scattered across central Italy. They formed a carefully organized network that dominated the region for over 3 centuries. Now here's something important. Ancient sources mention the 12 cities repeatedly, but they never give us a complete, definitive list. What I'm about to show you is based on archaeological evidence, scattered references in ancient texts, and modern scholarly consensus. The most likely members: Veii, Tarquinia, Caere, which we know today as Cerveteri, Vulci, Clusium, modern Chiusi, Volsinii, Perugia, now Perugia, Arezzo, Vetulonia, Rusellae, Populonia, and Volterra. Some scholars debate whether all of these were original members or whether cities like Cortona or Fiesole should be included instead. But these 12 appear most frequently in the evidence. What's certain? 12 independent city-states, each governing its own territory, each with its own kings or magistrates, each with massive fortification walls that still stand today. But here's what makes this fascinating. Livy, the Roman historian writing in the 1st century BCE, mentions the Etruscan League repeatedly. He calls it the Duodecim Populi Etruriae, the 12 peoples of Etruria. But notice what Livy does. He describes their power, he acknowledges their dominance, but he never fully explains why 12 cities. He mentions it as if it's self-evident, natural, obvious. It wasn't, because these 12 cities weren't just a political alliance. They were a sacred confederation, and at the center of everything was a place most people have never heard of. Fanum Voltumnae, the sanctuary of Voltumna. This was the religious and political center of the entire Etruscan world. Once a year, representatives from all 12 cities gathered here. They elected a supreme magistrate. They made collective decisions about war and peace. They conducted sacred games and religious ceremonies. The Greeks had something similar, the Ionian League, with its 12 cities meeting at the Panionian Sanctuary. 12 cities, sacred meetings, collective decisions. But here's the question that kept me awake. Why specifically 12? The number wasn't practical. It wasn't based on geography or population. It was religious. It was sacred. The Etruscans believed the universe was divided into 12 celestial regions, each ruled by a different deity. Look at this. The Liver of Piacenza, housed in the Municipal Museum of Piacenza. A bronze model of a sheep's liver divided into sections, each marked with the name of a god. It's a map of the divine cosmos used for divination. Count the major divisions. 12. 12 earthly cities mirroring 12 celestial regions. The political structure of Etruria was a reflection of the divine order of the universe. And Rome knew this. Rome understood this. And when Rome built its own political system, it copied it exactly. To understand what the Etruscan League actually was, we need to step back to around 700 BCE, when these city-states were consolidating power across central Italy. But before we examine each city, there's something important you need to know. Ancient sources mention the 12 cities of the Etruscan League constantly. Livy does. Dionysius of Halicarnassus does. They all agree on one thing: there were 12. But here's what's strange. Not a single ancient author provides a complete, definitive list of which 12 cities were members. We know some with absolute certainty. Veii, Tarquinia, Caere appear repeatedly in historical accounts. Others we identify through archaeological evidence, inscriptions, and the size and importance of their remains. The list I'm about to share represents the scholarly consensus based on centuries of research. But it's a reconstruction, an educated conclusion based on evidence, not an ancient checklist. Keep that uncertainty in mind. It matters. Let's examine each city individually, because each tells a different part of the story. Veii was the closest major Etruscan city to Rome, only 16 kilometers away. For centuries, it was Rome's greatest rival. The city controlled crucial trade routes and salt production from the coast. Archaeological excavations revealed massive defensive walls, an elaborate tunnel system for water management, and the famous sanctuary of Portinaccio, where the magnificent terracotta Apollo statue was found now in the Villa Giulia Museum in Rome. Veii fell to Rome in 396 BCE after a 10-year siege. Its population was massacred or enslaved. The city was never rebuilt. Tarquinia, called Tarchiuna in Etruscan, was perhaps the most influential of all 12 cities. It gave Rome its last three kings: Tarquinius Priscus, Servius Tullius, and Tarquinius Superbus. The necropolis of Tarquinia, now a UNESCO World Heritage Site, contains over 6,000 tombs. Many feature elaborate frescoes showing banquets, dances, athletic competitions, and daily life. These paintings are our most vivid window into Etruscan culture. The city remained powerful until the 3rd century BCE, when it finally submitted to Roman control. Caere, known in Etruscan as Sisra, was a major port city controlling access to inland trade routes. Its necropolis at Banditaccia, also UNESCO listed, features enormous tumulus tombs, circular mounds covering elaborate underground chambers carved to resemble houses. The sarcophagus of the spouses, now in Villa Giulia Museum, came from Caere. It shows a married couple reclining together at a banquet, a depiction that shocked Greek observers, who found the social freedom of Etruscan women scandalous. Caere maintained relatively good relations with Rome and was granted a special status called civitas sine suffragio, citizenship without voting rights. Vulci was a major center of bronze working and pottery production. The city exported vast quantities of goods throughout the Mediterranean. The Francois tomb, discovered in 1857, contains frescoes depicting both mythological scenes and historical events, including battles between Etruscans and Romans. These paintings are now in the Torlonia collection in Rome, though access is restricted. Archaeological evidence suggests Vulci was finally conquered by Rome around 280 BCE. Clusium, modern Chiusi, controlled strategic routes through central Italy. The city is famous for its distinctive cinerary urns, terracotta containers for cremated remains, often decorated with reclining figures on the lids. According to Livy, Lars Porsena, king of Clusium, besieged Rome around 508 BCE and may have briefly conquered it, though Roman sources downplay this humiliation. Volsinii, modern Orvieto, stood on a volcanic plateau nearly impregnable until Rome destroyed it in 264 BCE and forcibly relocated its population. Perugia controlled the upper Tiber Valley and resisted Rome until the 3rd century BCE. Arezzo was famous for its distinctive red pottery, later mass-produced as Aretine ware under Roman rule. Vetulonia, Rusellae, Populonia on the coast controlled vital iron resources from the island of Elba. Volterra, perched on high hills, maintained alabaster workshops and remained influential until the social war of 91 to 88 BCE. 12 cities, each powerful, each independent, but bound together by something deeper than politics. Once a year, representatives from all 12 cities gathered at Fonum Voltumnae. The exact location remains disputed, possibly near modern Orvieto, possibly near Lake Bolsena. These weren't just diplomatic meetings, they were sacred assemblies, religious festivals combined with political councils. The 12 cities elected a Zylath, Mekil Raznal, something like a supreme magistrate or federal leader. This position was temporary, probably annual, and held limited executive authority. Here's what's crucial. The League made decisions collectively, but implementation was voluntary. Each city retained its sovereignty. If Veii wanted to fight Rome alone while other cities stayed neutral, as happened during Veii's final siege, the League couldn't force them to help. This decentralized structure was both the League's strength and its fatal weakness. And this is where it gets interesting. Rome's later Latin League, 12 cities. Rome's religious colleges, often 12 members. Rome's adoption of Etruscan divination practices, maintained by 12 haruspices. Rome didn't just copy the political structure, they copied the sacred number, the divine architecture, but they never admitted where it came from. At its height, around 600 to 500 BCE, Etruscan influence stretched far beyond these 12 core cities. To the north, Etruscan colonies spread across the Po Valley, the region Romans later called Cisalpine Gaul. Cities like Felsina, modern Bologna, and Mantua were founded or heavily influenced by Etruscan settlers. To the south, Etruscan expansion reached Campania. Capua, one of Italy's largest cities, was originally Etruscan. So was Nola. The Etruscans controlled trade routes, established settlements, and competed with Greek colonies for dominance in southern Italy. Archaeological evidence from Pompeii and Herculaneum shows Etruscan influence in the region decades before both cities were buried by Vesuvius in 79 CE. Inscriptions in Etruscan, architectural styles, religious practices. But these territories weren't part of the original 12. They were colonies, outposts, areas of influence, not full members of the Sacred League. By 400 BCE, this expansion was collapsing. Gauls invaded from the north, conquering Etruscan cities in the Po Valley. Greek cities pushed back in the south. And in the center, Rome was growing stronger. One by one, the 12 cities fell, not all at once, but gradually, over 3 centuries. Veii in 396 BCE, Vulci in 280 BCE, Volsinii in 264 BCE, Tarquinia and Carrhae submitting to Roman control without final battles. By 100 BCE, Etruria was fully Romanized. The League was gone. The sacred meetings at Fonum Voltumnae had ceased. The 12 cities remained as physical locations, but the confederation that bound them, the religious and political structure that had dominated central Italy for centuries, was extinct. So let's reconsider what we actually know about the Etruscan League. We know it consisted of exactly 12 cities organized around a sacred number. They met annually at a religious sanctuary. They elected temporary leaders, but retained individual sovereignty. They expanded far beyond the original 12, but never admitted new core members. Rome adopted the same structure and the same sacred number. We know Rome then systematically destroyed or absorbed every single member of that league. Here's what disturbs me about this pattern. Rome didn't just conquer the Etruscans militarily. Rome inherited their political model, their religious framework, their concept of a sacred confederation of cities. The Latin League that Rome later dominated? 12 cities. The College of Arvalis Fratris, one of Rome's most ancient priesthoods? 12 members. The division of Roman religious authority? Echoes of the 12 Etruscan celestial regions. But here's what Rome never did. Rome never acknowledged the source. Roman historians like Livy write extensively about Etruscan power and Etruscan wars. They describe the League, they mention the 12 cities, but they frame it as something alien, foreign, other, not as the foundation Rome built upon, not as the political and religious architecture Rome copied and claimed as its own invention. What if the Etruscan League wasn't just another ancient confederation? What if it was the prototype, the original model for how Rome itself understood political organization and divine order? And what if Rome spent centuries erasing that connection because acknowledging it would undermine Rome's founding mythology? I can't prove this definitively. The sources are fragmentary. Finum Voltumne's exact location remains undiscovered. We have no Etruscan texts explaining their own political theory, but the pattern is there, the structure is there, the sacred number is there. And Rome's systematic destruction and cultural erasure of the Etruscans becomes less like ordinary conquest and more like what exactly? Ask yourself, why would Rome work so hard to obscure the origin of a political system it clearly adopted? The stones remain. The massive walls of Volterra still stand. The tombs of Tarquinia and Cerveteri still whisper through their painted walls. The tunnels beneath Veii still carry water after 2,600 years. But the League is gone. The sacred confederation of 12 cities that once dominated Italy exists only in fragments of ancient texts and patterns we can barely trace. 3 questions remain unanswered. 1. Why did the Etruscans choose 12, exactly 12 as their sacred number, and what divine architecture were they mirroring? 2. Why did Rome adopt the same structure, the same number, the same religious framework, and then systematically erase who created it? 3. What else did Rome inherit from the Etruscans that they then claimed as originally Roman? The 12 cities fell. The League dissolved. But its echo shaped everything that came after. But there's something else, something I need to show you before we close. These 12 cities, from Veii to Volterra, from Tarquinia to Vulci, they all spoke the same language. They all wrote in the same script. And across their territories, archaeologists have found over 13,000 inscriptions, 13,000 texts, carved on tomb walls, engraved on bronze mirrors, painted on pottery, inscribed on lead sheets, written on gold plaques. Names, dedications, contracts, religious formulas, legal documents. We can read the alphabet. We recognize the script perfectly. We've identified hundreds of individual words, but we cannot fully understand the language. The longest Etruscan text ever found is called the Liber Linteus, the Linen Book. It contains over 1,200 words written on strips of linen. And here's the strangest part of its survival story. It was found in Egypt, wrapped around a mummy. Someone in the 3rd century BCE used an Etruscan religious text written 1,200 kilometers away in Italy as burial wrappings. That's how it survived, by accident. As mummy bandages, scholars have been trying to fully translate it for over 160 years. We know it's religious. We can identify some repeated formulas. We recognize words we've seen on other inscriptions. But complete translation? Still impossible. And here's what really disturbs me about this. We've deciphered Egyptian hieroglyphs dead for 1,400 years before the Rosetta Stone was carved. We've deciphered Mesopotamian cuneiform extinct for over 2,000 years when archaeologists found it. We've cracked Linear B, a language no one spoke for 3,200 years. But Etruscan? spoken in Italy until the 1st century CE, documented in 13,000 inscriptions, written in an alphabet derived from Greek that we can read perfectly, and we still can't fully decode it. Why? And it gets stranger. The Etruscan language is related to only two other ancient languages, one spoken on the Greek island of Limnos, hundreds of miles across the Aegean Sea, another spoken in the Alps, far to the north. Three languages, three completely different locations, all related, none related to any other language family we know. Rome conquered Etruria. Rome absorbed millions of Etruscan speakers. Rome lived alongside Etruscans for centuries. Roman authors mention Etruscan books, religious texts, history books, ritual manuals, but Rome never preserved them. The Greeks? Rome preserved their literature religiously, thousands of texts copied and recopied for centuries. The Etruscans? 3 long texts, that's all that survived. 3. The last inscription in Etruscan dates to the 1st century CE. After that, silence. An entire language spoken for over 800 years, written by millions of people, documented in thousands of texts, simply went extinct within a few generations. Or did it? In the next episode, we're going to investigate the Etruscan language, not just what it was, but why it vanished so completely. We'll examine the 3 longest texts that survived and what they're trying to tell us. We'll explore why Etruscan is related to languages from Limnos and the Alps, but nothing else. We'll look at what Roman authors said about Etruscan books and why those books disappeared. And we'll ask the question that makes scholars uncomfortable. Did the Etruscan language die naturally, or did Rome systematically erase it? Because if Rome could eliminate a language spoken by millions, a language written in 13,000 surviving texts, a language that existed for 800 years, what else did they erase? What other knowledge vanished with those 12 cities? What secrets are still carved into 13,000 stones that we can read but cannot understand? See you in the next video.